If you've ever realized that teaching someone to play a violin takes a different skill set than teaching them algebra, or if you've ever started a lesson by gaining the learner's attention and then proceeded to build on previous knowledge that they've already learned, then you've used the principles outlined by Robert Gagne, probably without even realizing it. Robert Gagne is an American psychologist born in 1916 in North Andover, Massachusetts. He decided early on in high school that he wanted to be a psychologist and studied at Yale University and received his graduate degree from Brown University. At the start of World War II, Gagne joined the Army and began his career there administering aptitude tests to cadets who were joining combat aircraft. He went on to become commissioned as a second lieutenant and held several positions within the U.S. Armed Forces. He developed psychomotor tests used in aircrew classification, held a position in the U.S. Air Force in what would later become the Air Force Personnel and Training Research Center, and was technical director of the maintenance laboratory at Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado. Gagne has said this position was one of peak enjoyment in his career because he had the opportunity to develop a new technology for forecasting training requirements for the Air Force, and he was able to work with a stimulating group of research scientists. In 1958, Gagne became a professor of psychology at Princeton University. During this time, he conducted studies of intellectual skills and their prerequisites, which would lead to the formulation of his idea of the learning hierarchy as it applies to those intellectual skills. In 1962, he joined the American Institutes for Research as the Director of Research. This organization was heavily engaged in research and training, the assessment of human performance, educational program evaluation, and other questions. It was here in 1965 that Gagne first published his seminal work, The Conditions of Learning. Although Gagne's earlier work was grounded in the behaviorist tradition, The Conditions of Learning was influenced more by the information processing view of learning and memory. Gagne's work is sometimes summarized as the Gagne assumption. This assumption is that different types of learning exist and that different instructional conditions can bring about this learning. Two of the main components of Gagne's conditions of learning are the 5 categories of learning and the 9 events of instruction. Gagne recognized that having a learner memorize and recite the 7 continents on the earth is a different learning outcome than having a learner learn negotiation and influence and leadership skills. Therefore, he created the 5 categories of learning, which is a framework for all the different types of learning across many instructional settings. The first category is verbal information, or declarative knowledge. This is simply memorizing and reciting, learning things like what are the 7 warning signs for cancer, or list in order the steps that are required to service a machine. With the next category, intellectual skills, it's not just knowing what, but it's knowing how. It's not only knowing what the number 4 is or what the number 8 is, it's knowing how to add them together to get 12. Within the intellectual skills, there's a distinct learning hierarchy that applies, and learners need to start at the base of the hierarchy before they can move on to the more complex. The learning skills needed here are cumulative. Learners must be able to use the discriminations to be able to call out key features before they can move on to processing rules and higher order rules. Cognitive strategies are the capabilities that allow us to manage our own thinking and learning processes, telling us how to learn and how to remember and how to solve problems. When faced with a broken machine that he's never seen before, the mechanic can use his prior knowledge of tools and of safety and form an analogy of a machine that he knows how to repair and use the same skills to repair this machine. The next category of learning is motor skills, and although these types of skills can be very diverse, anything from playing an instrument to driving a car, the one thing they all have in common is their dependence upon smoothness, precision, and timing of muscular movement. And finally, the attitudes are the outcomes of learning that influence the individual's choices of personal action, such as influencing their willingness to recycle or their willingness to exercise. In regards to the matter of instruction, Gagne has said that each of the categories of learning outcomes require a different set of conditions for optimizing learning, retention, and transferability. Optimal conditions include external events in the learner's immediate environment, usually called instruction, and internal conditions acting through the learner's working memory. Let's move on to the second piece of the puzzle, the 9 events of instruction, which Gagne defined as any set of events external to the learner which are designed to support the internal processes of learning. Gagne's instructional theory is widely used in the design of instruction by designers in many settings. It brings in ideas from behaviorism and cognitism, and he provides a clear template which is easy to follow when designing instructional events. Gagne's focus for instructional design is that learning can be systematically connected to the design of instruction, and he emphasized the design principles and procedures that need to take place for effective teaching and learning. According to Gagne, learning occurs in a series of learning events, and each event must be accomplished before the next in order for learning to take place. The first step is to gain attention, to give the learners a stimulus to begin instruction. This can be done by starting with a story, or to provide the WIFM, or the what's in it for me, why this learning is going to be relevant to your audience. Step number 2 is to inform the learners of the objectives, telling the learner what they will be able to do as a result of the instruction. This can be in a more formalized objective, or it can be something very simple that the audience will understand. The next step is to stimulate recall of prior knowledge. It's easier for the learners to learn new skills when they're able to connect them to what they already know. This can be done as a verbal review or having the learners create a mind map of previous knowledge. The next step is to present the material. Present the content in different ways with different modes. Use lecture and hands-on activities, case studies, and so forth. Use chunking to present the content in small, manageable bites, and don't forget to build upon the previous knowledge that the learners already have. Step number 5 is to provide guidance to the learner. Students should be provided with guidance in order to cut down on frustration during learning activities. This can be in the form of one-on-one coaching or Q&A, rubrics or cheat sheets, anything that would be useful in providing both structure and guidance to the learner. The next step is to elicit performance. Students should be given the opportunity to be able to practice and apply their skills. While this can be accomplished by modeling by the instructor, the most effective method is for the students to be able to practice their newly acquired behavior, skills, or knowledge on their own under guidance from the instructor. The next step is to provide feedback, and the feedback should be specific rather than general, "you're doing a good job." Tell them why they are doing a good job, or specific guidance on what to improve. Step 8 is to assess performance. Evaluate the learners to determine if the lesson has been learned and to provide general progress information. This is also a good time where the students can determine content areas that they still need to master. And finally, step 9, enhance retention and transfer. This can be done by informing the learners about similar problem situations, review the lesson, provide additional practice, or give the students the opportunity to apply their new skills in a personal contest. So what is it about Gagne's instructional model that makes it so distinctive from others? First, it's based on information processing theories of learning. It does not attempt to propose new theory pertaining to learning and memory, but only to use existing theory as a basis for the conceptualization of instruction. Secondly, the theory is comprehensive in the sense that it attempts to include all the kinds of learning outcomes to which instruction is usually addressed. This is the significance of the proposal of the 5 kinds of learning outcomes and the inclusion of attitudes and motor skills, as well as cognitive abilities. And a third distinctive feature is the fact that it combines external instruction with the internal learning process and memory. The inclusion of these characteristics makes it possible for this theory to deal with instructions of many forms in a variety of settings. In 1969, Gagne joined the faculty at Florida State University, where he would remain until his death in 2002. He went on to write numerous books regarding instructional design and educational psychology, and was awarded many awards for his research.